Everyone thinks avoidants are these independent, self-sufficient people who don't need anyone, but that's complete garbage. They're actually some of the neediest people on the planet. They've just gotten really good at hiding it behind a wall of fake independence. Scratch beneath that "I don't need anybody" surface, and you'll find someone desperately craving connection, but too terrified to admit it. The neediness masquerade. Avoidants have turned neediness into performance art, where they pretend to be completely self-reliant while secretly depending on others for validation, attention, and emotional regulation. They're like emotional vampires who've convinced themselves they don't drink blood while constantly feeding off other people's energy and responses. Their entire identity is built around appearing needless, but this facade requires constant maintenance and validation from others. They need people to see them as independent. They need partners to chase them. They need others to admire their self-sufficiency. The irony is that maintaining their image of not needing anyone actually makes them incredibly needy for specific types of attention and validation. They're desperately dependent on getting reactions that confirm their independence narrative. When someone pulls away or stops pursuing them, they panic because their entire sense of self depends on being seen as the one who doesn't need the relationship. Their neediness is just hidden behind layers of reverse psychology and emotional manipulation designed to get others to meet their needs without them having to ask directly. The validation addiction. Avoidants are absolutely starving for validation. They've just learned to get it through indirect manipulation rather than honest requests. They need constant proof that they're desirable, important, and valuable. But they can't ask for this validation directly, because that would contradict their independent image. Instead, they create elaborate scenarios where others have to prove their worth and dedication. They pull away so people will chase them. They act disinterested so others will work harder for their attention. They create distance so partners will fight to close the gap. Every avoidant behavior is actually a desperate plea for someone to prove they matter. Their neediness shows up as constant testing and game playing designed to extract validation without having to admit they want it. They need their partners to be obsessed with them, to fight for them, to prove their love repeatedly. They're essentially running a full-time validation extraction operation while pretending they don't care about the results. The emotional dependency denial. Despite their protests about independence, avoidants are completely dependent on others for emotional regulation. They just outsource their emotional needs in sneaky ways that maintain their illusion of self-sufficiency. They need other people to provide stability, consistency, and emotional grounding, but they pretend this dependency doesn't exist. They're constantly monitoring their partner's moods and reactions to determine how to feel about themselves. When their partner is happy and attentive, they feel secure. When their partner seems distant or upset, they spiral into anxiety and self-doubt. They're completely emotionally dependent on others while maintaining the fiction that they're emotionally self-reliant. Their neediness manifests as requiring others to be predictable, available, and consistently validating, while they maintain the right to be unpredictable and emotionally unavailable themselves. They need their partners to be rock-solid emotional anchors while they float around being mysterious and detached. It's emotional dependency with a superiority complex attached. The attention hunger games. Avoidants are desperately hungry for attention. They just want it delivered in very specific ways that don't threaten their independence narrative. They need to be pursued, desired, and wanted, but they can't appear to need these things, or their whole identity crumbles. They create elaborate attention-getting schemes, where they withdraw just enough to make others worry and chase them, but not so much that people actually leave. They're constantly calibrating their behavior to maintain optimal attention levels while appearing totally indifferent to whether they get attention or not. Their neediness shows up as requiring others to read their minds and meet their emotional needs without being asked. They need partners who will pursue them when they pull away, comfort them when they're distant, and validate them when they act like they don't care. They're essentially training others to meet their needs while maintaining plausible deniability about having any needs at all. The security blanket syndrome. Avoidants desperately need secure, reliable people in their lives to function, but they can't admit this dependency without destroying their self-image. They seek out partners who will provide consistency and emotional stability while they remain free to be inconsistent and emotionally chaotic. They're like emotional tourists who need a home base to return to after their adventures in detachment and independence. They need someone waiting for them, someone stable and predictable, someone who won't abandon them despite their push-pull behavior. They're completely dependent on having this secure foundation while pretending they're just casually involved. Their neediness manifests as requiring others to be more invested in the relationship than they appear to be. They need partners who will stick around through their emotional unavailability, who will tolerate their mixed signals, and who will provide consistent love despite inconsistent reciprocation. They're essentially looking for unconditional emotional support while offering conditional participation in return. The covert intimacy addiction. Despite their protests about space and independence, avoidants are actually addicted to intimacy. They just need it delivered in ways that don't trigger their vulnerability alarms. They're desperately craving close connection, but they need it to happen on their terms and in their timing. They need partners who can provide emotional intimacy without demanding emotional intimacy in return. They want to be seen, understood, and deeply known, while maintaining the right to remain mysterious and unknowable themselves. They're incredibly needy for intimate connection, but only if it doesn't require them to be vulnerable or consistent. Their neediness shows up as requiring others to be emotionally intuitive enough to meet their intimacy needs without explicit requests. They need partners who can provide closeness during their brief windows of availability and emotional support during their longer periods of distance. They're essentially demanding premium intimacy services while pretending they're just casually browsing the relationship menu. The truth is that avoidants are some of the neediest people in relationships. They've just developed sophisticated systems for getting their needs met while maintaining the illusion of independence. They need constant validation, attention, emotional support, and intimate connection. They just need it delivered through elaborate games and manipulations that protect their self-image as people who don't need anyone.